From the Center for the Study and Teaching of Writing at The Ohio State University, this is Writers Talk. I'm Doug Dangler. Today we are at the Ohioana Book Festival on the grounds of the Fort Hays campus. So we welcome all of you to look at www.ohioana.org to see all the stuff that you missed, including the author Thomas C. Maroukis, who has written a book called Peyote Road about American Indian religious freedom and the Native American Church. So tell me about the book.
Well, thank you for having me. The book is a history of the Native American Church, which, as you may know, uses peyote as a sacrament. Peyote is a small cactus plant harvested in southern Texas, and it is ingested as a sacrament in the same way wine and bread is used in Christianity as a sacrament. The use of peyote in such a fashion is at least several thousand years old. When the Spanish arrived in Mexico in the 1500s, it was already in wide usage in Mexico. Later on, as the reservation system developed in America in the 19th century, peyote as a sacrament moved into the Kiowa Comanche Reservation in Oklahoma. And some of the people there, particularly Quanah Parker, the leader of the Comanche, developed it into an actual service which begins at dusk and goes to dawn, obviously a 12-hour service. From there, it became kind of institutionalized as a specific type of service and started to spread from reservation to reservation, pretty much every reservation west of the Mississippi River. Today, there are about 300,000 members. The problem that the church had is the federal government did not use or apply the First Amendment to Native American spiritual practices. And the government tried for the longest time to have peyote criminalized, which it did not succeed in doing, but certainly tried to. And the book is the story of the Native American church people struggling to have the First Amendment applied to them, which did not really happen until two bills, Native American Religious Freedom Acts in 1993 and 1994. So having full First Amendment protection is very, very recent. So the book is about virtually a century of struggle for religious freedom for Native American peoples.
Okay. You know, I would have, I'm sort of surprised, I would have assumed that, or I guess I did assume that peyote has been illegal for a long time, but it's not. You're saying
Right.
it's
Right. Peyote was not really on anybody's radar for a long time until it was introduced into the United States. In 1918, to be exact, there were hearings in Congress. People spoke in favor of it as a sacrament. People spoke against it. And First Amendment did win the day, and it was not criminalized. But then various states began to criminalize it. So probably about 17 Western states criminalized the use of peyote or the possession or transportation of peyote, as you would have today with controlled substances. So it was a struggle on the state level, and it only took federal laws to kind of negate state laws. 1965, peyote was added to the list of controlled substances as part of the war on drugs. But an exemption was made for members of federally recognized tribes who are members of the church to ingest peyote without any criminal responsibility. So that's where we are today. If you are a member of the church and you are a member of a federally recognized tribe, of which there are about 565 federally recognized tribes, you are then exempt from any prosecution for use, transportation. This would be similar during Prohibition. Churches were still allowed to serve wine as a sacrament during Prohibition. So that would be a parallel in history.
Okay. And in the writing of this, you've done a lot of interviewing with people. You've done a lot of oral history. Tell me about the collection of that and its use in the book.
Well, this started off in a kind of serendipitous way. My background is not in American Indian Studies, but I did meet some people who I became very good friends with, Native American people, and I eventually started going out to their home on the Yankton Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. And the family were very active in the Native American church, and I began going to religious services with them. And before I knew it, I was doing more traveling. I was interviewing people. I was starting to collect material. I visited various archives. And I also visited some university collections of oral history, such as University of South Dakota has, oh my goodness, 1,500 or 2,000 oral histories. and a good many of them were from members of the Native American Church. So I've collected interviews, I've used other people's interviews, and I've used archival material, what's available, especially on the federal issues. There's plenty of archival material from earlier in the century.
So how did you mix all these together? What is your take on it?
Well, what I tried to do is look at why did this particular faith emerge, and then why did it spread? Because it starts really in the U.S. from really no involvement to 300,000 people. And there were three things that I come up with, part of my general thesis here. First of all, it spread because it was perceived as medicine. In Native American use of the word medicine, they really mean spiritual healing. It's not medicine as you or I might use the word medicine. So they perceive this as a spiritual way to heal. And during the reservation system, of course, there were just immense health problems, tuberculosis and so forth, for example, and of course, problem with alcohol in various places. So that was one. The second is that it spread at the time when many missionaries were on the reservations trying to push Christianity. And there was some resistance to that. In fact, there was a lot of resistance to that because the Christianity was associated with trying to do away with Native American culture. The missionaries were completely opposed to the Native American Church, but the Native American Church was perceived as Indian religion. It had all the parameters, sacred herbs, sacred numbers, belief in healing by the Creator, and it was perceived as Indian. Therefore, it was fairly readily accepted. The third is that it provided an ethical system to people who were lost their political autonomy, lost their economic autonomy, but the Native American Church was a way to maintain some cultural autonomy. And it had an ethical system not different from most of the world's religions, about brotherly love, about honesty, about kindness, about living a good lifestyle, and it brought hope to people who were in somewhat of a hopeless situations.
Okay. So let's bring this back to one of the things that everybody here at Ohioana shares is an Ohio background. Tell me about your Ohio background, because it seems so very different from the kinds of things that you're studying in the book.
Well, I'm from the East Coast. I'm a city guy in Newark, New Jersey, and I ended up in Ohio teaching. I taught first at Bowling Green University, then I taught at Heidelberg College, and now I'm at Capital University. And I got involved when I moved to Columbus, which I love Columbus, to be honest with you. I got involved with the Native American Indian Center in town here. It's a large Indian center. They put on 2 powwows a year. There are several thousand Native people here, and it's through the Indian Center that helped me get involved with people out on the reservations in the West.
And we've got all the mound builders and things like that in the side, which is, has the religions also spread into Ohio? It's
pretty much west of the Mississippi.
Okay.
The Native people here are people who have returned. You probably know Shawnee, Miamis, all the other people, the Delaware, were all pushed out of Ohio in the 19th century. And the Native populations are people who have returned for work, for school, for whatever from the 1950s on. So there are individuals in Ohio who are members of the Native American Church, but it is not a large phenomenon in Ohio as it is, say, probably largest would be Oklahoma, South Dakota. The Navajo have the largest percentage of their people as members of the Native American Church, probably 50% or plus. So it's most widespread amongst the Navajo.
Okay. All right. Well, Thomas C. Maroukis, I want to thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me.
For being here on Writers Talk. Again, the book is Peyote Road, and there you go.
All right.
All right. And from the Center for the Study and Teaching of Writing at The Ohio State University, this is Doug Dangler saying, keep writing.